In modern society, we're constantly facing all kinds of pressure. So how can we make sure we don't break down under long-term stress? First, don't get tangled up in dangers that exist only in your imagination. Start by returning to the facts. When people are under intense pressure, one of the easiest things to do is to replace reality with imagination. One piece of bad news appears, and we start imagining total failure. One setback happens, and we begin to doubt whether the entire path is wrong. We find ourselves temporarily at a disadvantage, and suddenly we feel like we will never have another chance. Maybe only one thing has actually happened, but our minds have already jumped to the worst possible ending. At times like this, what we need most is investigation and research. What is the actual situation right now? Which difficulties have already happened, and which ones are merely assumptions? How much of our own resources have we lost, and what do we still have? When you break a problem down into facts, it stops being one giant, uncontrollable source of fear. A lot of pressure doesn't come from the situation itself. It comes from not knowing how serious the situation actually is. So the purpose of investigation is to take emotions out of the driver's seat and put facts back in charge of our judgment. Second, don't try to carry the whole world on your shoulders. Focus on the main problem. One of the biggest reasons long-term pressure wears people down is that everything starts to feel equally important. Today, you need to survive. Tomorrow, you need to think about growth. You have to deal with the crisis in front of you while also preparing for future risks. Internal problems, external pressure, and limited resources all seem to hit you at the same time. If you try to carry every problem at once, even the strongest person will eventually lose the ability to act. In reality, even when a situation contains many different conflicts, there is usually one that matters most at a particular stage. In other words, you don't need to solve everything at the same time. What you really need to do is to identify the one problem that currently has the greatest impact on the whole situation. If the most important thing right now is preserving your energy, then don't rush to expand in every direction. If the priority at this stage is building a solid base, don't scatter your resources everywhere. If the biggest problem is internal, deal with the internal problem first instead of letting outside noise pull you in every direction. You don't need to use sheer willpower to carry every source of pressure at once. You need to keep ranking your problem by priority. Once you know what matters most, you also know what you can temporarily leave alone. And that can free up a huge amount of energy that would otherwise be consumed by useless anxiety. Third, don't expect to win everything at once. Break the challenges into different stages. A lot of people are crushed by pressure because they always want to see the final outcome immediately. When they make a choice, they want to guarantee they won't regret it years later. When they start a business, they want to know for certain that it will succeed. When they face a long-term problem, they want to solve it completely and immediately. As long as the finish line remains unclear, they can't feel at peace. But we need to deliberately develop a different way of thinking. It means breaking a seemingly chaotic and lengthy process into different stages. At different stages, the balance of power is different, and so are the main tasks. When you are weak, your priority may be to preserve your strengths and build your resources. Only after the conditions change do you move into a stage of holding your ground and eventually pushing back. You don't demand that the version of you in the first stage accomplish what only belongs to the final stage. If you're at a low point right now, your task may not to be completely transform your life overnight. It may simply be to stabilize your cash flow first. If you've just started building a product, your task isn't to scale immediately. It's to get your first real user. If you haven't built your abilities yet, your task isn't to prove yourself. It's to accumulate. This is where long-term thinking becomes genuinely stress-relieving. You don't need to solve your entire life today. You only need to complete the task of this particular stage. Once you stretch your time horizon, a temporary failure is no longer a final verdict. It becomes just one change in the process that needs to be understood and analyzed. Fourth, don't see yourself as a lone hero. rely on the power of a group. When a person carries pressure alone for a long time, it's easy to develop an illusion. Every problem has to be solved by me, every responsibility has to be carried by me. But many complex problems cannot be solved by one person sitting alone and thinking harder. They are solved through organizations, division of labor, discussions, and real feedback. Don't mistake asking for help for weakness. Keep looking for people you can work with, resources you can mobilize, and people who can share the workload with you. Self-reliance has never meant refusing to cooperate. Its real meaning is to take responsibility for your own actions while bringing together every force you can work with. Fifth, don't try to be right all the time. Keep correcting yourself through action. Under intense pressure, one of the things people fear most is making the wrong decision. So they keep analyzing, they keep preparing, they hope to find a completely safe solution. But the more desperately you try to avoid mistakes, the harder it becomes to take action. And the less you act, the less information you have, which only makes the pressure even greater. Instead, we can form a judgment based on the information we already have. Take action, observe the results, identify where our assumptions were wrong, and then revise our understanding before entering the next round of action. An incomplete first judgment does not mean failure. What is truly dangerous is treating one judgment as an unchangeable final answer, or staying trapped in imagination because you are afraid of being wrong. We can't see the entire outcome in advance, but even when our initial understanding is limited, we can gradually move closer to the right answer through practice. Take one step and get feedback. Find a problem and adjust quickly. When the conditions change, analyze the situation again. Once pressure is turned into action, it stops being nothing more than a drain on your energy. So to sum it all up, staying strong under long-term pressure doesn't depend on being born without emotions, and it doesn't simply come down to having extraordinary willpower. It comes from having a clear method. Use investigation to stop imagination from running wild, analyze the main problem to reduce internal friction, use stage-based thinking to find the pressure of urgency, use collective strengths to share the burden, and use action and correction loop instead of obsessing over finding the perfect answer. Truly stable people aren't people who are certain they will never fail. There are people who, no matter how complicated the situation becomes, can return to reality, identify the most important problem right now, and take the next step. We are often not crushed by pressure because the road is too long. We are crushed because we try to walk the entire road today. Thanks for watching this video. I'm Yu. Follow me for more to level up your mind.